The new IS, is it really that new? Well, I'm gonna leave my personal thoughts aside. You've seen the exterior montage, and this is definitely a more unique looking sedan regardless of trim level in the segment. The interior space, however, is updated quite a bit from the previous generation IS, and that's because they're combining what the RC was, the coupe, and the old IS together. So the center stack looks identical to what you got on the RC, and if you hated that, you're gonna hate this here. And they've added piano black right across the whole plane that you're using the entire time. All the touch areas that you're interacting with are just gobbledygook full of fingerprints, and it just sucks. They have the touch sensitive slider for the HVAC, for the temperature. Everything else is physical, however. So that's why I'm saying this is kind of like that throwback car to the previous generation Lexus products while adding in some new things. Like the door panels, you see the leather accent by the door handle. There's a lot of nice touches here. You get the F-Sport packages, you get the difference in interiors, you get this red stylized door panel and seats. And overall, like, things are padded perfectly by your leg. I mean, just the comfort factor is high. However, in this all-wheel drive variant, you still get the transfer case hump here that impedes on your legroom. This is just something that's been going on forever with this car of this generation. Now, since we've driven the 300, the 350, and the 500 now, I will tell you that the interiors are almost identical. There's really no way to tell them apart aside from maybe the gauge cluster. So the pros are the seats are great. There's a lot of comfort. This is a quiet cabin, feels way quieter than the previous IS. And they've updated the infotainment, although it's a half update because you don't get the new software that is being released on the NX. The negatives are the screen is stuck on. It just looks generic as hell. The piano black stuff that's in the middle, thank God that's the only part that has the piano gloss. The back seats are a little bit cramped, but overall this is a very usable interior space. And again, I'm going to detail this more in the IS500 that comes out in September of 2021. But let's head out into the shop and talk about some of the mechanical things about the IS350 all-wheel drive F-Sport.
Mark, all new Lexus IS. This has been a thoroughly updated variant of this car. Well, while it is getting a little bit long in the tooth, they did do some pretty substantial engineering changes, specifically to body structure. However, the V6 variants of this car are identical to the vehicle that came before this, which means you still get either a 6-speed automatic found on the all-wheel drive variant or an 8-speed automatic found in the rear-wheel drive variant. You also get a 4-popper. From an engineering perspective, Mark, they've done some improvements to the body structure of this car through some manufacturing improvements by adding more welds. They've done things to the radiator supports and to the C-pillars. All of this added body rigidity is supposed to reduce the amount of NVH that makes its way into the cabin, and plus improving the dynamics of this vehicle. They've also done some subtle changes, like change the way the wheels are attached to this car. They've gone to wheel studs versus bolts, like they've done lug nuts they've done in the past.
Yeah, and it's all about this evolution of manufacturing process. They do it, they implement it in certain vehicles, and then they apply it to all the others. So there's more laser screw welding and all the other things that Lexus has been doing, and now it's just trickling down to the IS. This is a much refreshed and improved IS using the new technologies, but still using a lot of the old technologies at the same time.
So and they've incorporated the new Lexus or Toyota driving signature.
Yeah, this is something that they're trying to unify the driving experience across all Lexus products. So the IS was one of the first that went to their custom designed test track that they spent billions of dollars on. And from engineering, there's an engineering checklist of like, what are our NVH targets? What are our ride quality targets? Smoothness? What are our handling targets? And they're trying to make every car from the LC kind of all the way down to like the RX 350 feel and sound similar. So you know when you get into a Lexus product, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's all about corporate identity. And that's something like BMW has done for a long time, and it's nice to see that happen for Lexus. So when it comes to this car itself, you get double wishbone in the front with a steel front subframe. You can either get this car with an open diff in the rear-wheel drive variant without the performance package with passive dampers, and then when you add the dynamics or performance package, you get adaptive dampers and a Torsen rear differential. In the all-wheel drive car, there's also a performance pack, and it does some subtle things, but the big thing is adaptive dampers.
So when you look at the front suspension, you have aluminum in the knuckles and the lower control arms. On the V6 variant, this is the all-wheel drive. The nice thing is with the steel subframe, you get eccentric bolts in the front, so you get camber adjustment that you don't get on the IS500, which has an aluminum subframe from the GS, but you lose that adjustability. So it's just, again, one of these weird things they do with manufacturing. Tire size, however, all seasons on this car, but it maintains the same width as the V8 car, which, you know, take that for what it's worth. But I think really this is something that looks and feels updated, but is mostly older. And I think for Lexus people, you might like some of this. And if you're coming from like the BMW or Audi camp, you're like, hell no.
Yeah, it is what, honestly, it is what it is. This is tried and true Lexus, which means it's probably going to be very reliable and not bend you over at the dealership when you try to go get this thing serviced.
Let's get this thing on the road, at least the IS350 all-wheel drive variant, and we'll talk about all of our experiences across the trim levels.
Lexus IS, Mark. We've been in the 300, the 350 F Sport with the rear-wheel drive, and this all-wheel drive variant. And we're going to talk about all three of them in this video. So tell me about the 300, Mark.
300, 2-liter. Not what you would expect would be good in this car, but it felt lighter on its feet. The weight was definitely a factor, and it was just quick enough. I think that's what you would choose if you were cost-conscious. It definitely lacks what you're expecting from the IS, that V6 sound, but I would say out of all of them, it definitely is more sprightly. It feels way less, it feels like it weighs way less than the rest of the cars. Now, it lacks any type of emotion. It has the shell, the interior, but then you're like, oh, it feels like just kind of that economy car engine and drivetrain. So when we get into the 350, which is the tried and true Lexus or Toyota V6 with rear-wheel drive, specifically the F Sport with the 8-speed automatic, things get a little bit more lively.
Yeah, so I drove that on the street and on the track, and I will say it's a very pleasing car to drive at the limit. It rotates under braking, it rotates when you lift, but it does not rotate under throttle because this V6, despite being very, very reliable, does not produce a ton of power. And when you turn off fake engine noise, which this car for some reason has, it's not horrible sounding. In many ways, it's exactly what you're expecting in a Toyota product. I will say the 8-speed definitely does not have the refinement that most, if not all of its competitors have.
Like the ZF and pretty much everything now.
Yeah.
That I will say, you know, jumping from the 4-cylinder to the V6 is a huge upgrade. But like you said, in some ways, it's a downgrade because it doesn't feel quite as nimble as the 4-popper, but you make up for it with the engine sound. The same engine sound you've got for, you know, well over 10 years now.
Once you add, though, the dynamic handling package, which is the adaptive dampers, the Torsen, and some other fun bits, to the IS350 rear-wheel drive variant, which is, in my opinion, a must. If you're going to the V6, you should have a Torsen diff.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
It becomes very expensive.
It becomes very expensive, but it also changes the driving dynamics of the car more from that kind of entry-level luxury car to feeling a bit more sporty. But if you can't handle rear-wheel drive, which is a joke because the IS350 is one of the least oversteer-prone cars you're ever going to drive.
It has no torque, and unless you are really at its limits, it feels all-wheel drive.
You can't rotate that car. I mean, you really can't rotate that car unless you're really, really
So just get snow tires if you live in the in bad weather. Unless you live in the Arctic tundra, there's no reason to get the all-wheel drive.
But there is, and we're in it, Jack. So tell me about this. You spent a lot of time in here.
It's a 6-speed automatic, which
is about 67 years old.
Yes.
Or feels 67 years old.
It's not good. It is reliable, but honestly, that's not enough when this car costs $55,000. It makes the lack of torque even more apparent in this V6. The all-wheel drive takes away from the ride quality as well because the suspension geometry has changed. When they raise this car to add the all-wheel drive system, it makes it a little bit harsher than the IS350 rear-wheel drive.
It's about 25% harsher.
Because that car rides really well.
So I will say this about all of them, including the IS500. The interior space is remarkably quiet and comfortable. So there's really no penalty. The IS350 all-wheel drive is definitely the worst of all of them.
I would not buy this variant. It's too much money. It doesn't ride well. And the 6-speed automatic
Well, you're losing everything that makes the IS what it is. It's the trans is not quick to respond. It's not fun to drive. In manual mode, forget it.
And the gears are too spaced out to take advantage of the V6.
Yeah, it's like one of those like, oh, that's a Lexus. Oh, I think I'll take an IS. Oh, it's in the right price range. Oh, it's got all-wheel drive. And then it's just somebody that turns off their brain. It's just purely looking at it from, oh, it's the interior, it's the exterior, cool. But it's missing everything of the soul of the IS from the other trim levels.
Yeah, the 350 F Sport, despite being very expensive, drives very, very well and is rewarding to drive hard. So, but we've talked about these cars now in a vacuum, Mark, right? If you're a Lexus person, a Toyota person, you want an old school interior with all physical controls, a CD player, Lexus reliability, dealer experience, you're gonna love this car. But if you are cross-shopping it with really everything, and this is a super competitive segment. You have the G70, TLX Type S, 340i, S4, C43. You have all of these cars, and
this is a hard sell, dude. I'm not gonna lie. Like, you look at this car as a whole, objectively, like you always say, it's definitely one of the on the bottom of all the competitors. And you said this to me, like, reliability isn't everything, dude, especially in a luxury car category. And I will definitely grant you that this car is proof that reliability means nothing, because it's just not that great of a car.
Not that it means nothing.
I'm talking about the all-wheel drive.
Yeah, but if you're going to keep this car for 10 years and you're going to drive the wheels off of it and you don't care, you just want something you know is going to work, doesn't bend you over at the dealership, then you'll love the IS. But if you're like most people who spend $55,000 on cars and you're turning them over every 3 to 5 years, objectively, purely from performance, fuel economy, interior creature comforts, it's not particularly class competitive.
So let's talk about the last thing, the list. So since we've been in all of these, the top tier one, the one that is the best to drive and experience and all of the package together, is the IS500. You go from there down to the 350 rear-wheel drive, and then you go to the IS300 with the 2-liter, and then this is at the bottom, the V6 all-wheel drive with the 6-speed automatic. This is definitely the worst variant, and there is a huge difference in the way that all of these cars really feel and drive, and we're going to cover that in much more detail in the IS500 video. But I think, Jack, it's time.
All right.
Final thoughts. Final thoughts on the IS. We drove them all, believe it or not. And here's the takeaway. This is a quiet, refined car that doesn't beat you up in any trim level. The all-wheel drive V6 is definitely the worst riding, believe it or not. And this is pretty much the worst trim level. And it's because it has the most archaic drivetrain. The 6-speed feels, every bit of 20 years old in some cases. The 8-speed is a step up, and that's what you should opt for if you're looking at the V6 model. IS350 F Sport rear-wheel drive with the 8-speed is a really good balance with the performance pack. It gives you that little bit of dynamics where the rear feels like it moves around just a bit while being completely safe. And the 4-popper is a great choice if you just want a little bit better fuel economy. It always feels quick and sprightly. Then if you want to go to the V8, well, it makes a lot of noise. It has that old new school feel, or new school, old school feel, whatever, however you want to phrase the Lexus terminology now. So this definitely is way expensive for what it is. And I think that's the biggest downfall of this. They haven't improved enough to kind of catch up with what everybody else is doing, and that's the hardest pill to swallow here. But if you're somebody that wants that reliability, the overused word with these cars, it will do that for you. You just have to be ready for a lot of trade-offs. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.